I'd like to introduce Chef Jim Gallivan. He's a department chair for culinary arts from the Art Institute of Atlanta. I hope you enjoy his presentation today and take your seats.
Thank you. I'll just give you the Cliff's Notes on my background, starting with I have the curse of a liberal arts education.
Blessing, Chef, blessing.
But I sought redemption working myself through college cooking. And went to graduate school to be a college professor, and did that for a little while as a doctoral candidate. And a little while into it, I kind of came, at least where I was, the realization was that professors write and the graduate students teach. And I was having a heck of a good time teaching, and to suddenly go into the cave called the library for the next few years just didn't appeal to me. And I talked to my advisor, and he said, you know, you're a real good teacher. Why don't you go with that? So it just kind of snowballed that way. And the short story is that I was a teacher in public schools for 9 years. I was a food and beverage executive for 25. And then I came back to do culinary education. And it's kind of interesting because the last school I worked at, I actually had worked my way up to a dean of academic affairs, and I had to work very hard to work myself back down into a department chair where I could be with the department I really liked. The last college was multi-department. Two of my charges were the criminal justice department and the massage therapy department. And it was always entertaining because when I'd go to the massage department, they were usually smudging one of the treatment rooms. And when I would go to see the criminal justice guys, they were showing someone how to do the perfect perp walk. So that tells you we're not doing a perp. If we have a perp, we'll do a perp walk. But well, that could be like that. At any rate, if you're familiar with the art institutes, you probably don't associate them with the culinary arts. But we have lots of other things going on. We have media arts, we have design, and we have fashion in addition to the culinary arts. So the general education are the courses that all of our degree granting programs need to take. And by the rules of the game with the Southern accrediting, the Southern Association of College and Schools, the idea is that it can't be a gen ed unless it's truly gen. In other words, it has to have multi-majors in it. So that I can't have culinary math, I can't do English for food writers, I can't do anything that's specific. Otherwise, I would risk having to offer an occupational studies degree instead of an arts or a science degree. Nothing wrong with that degree, it's just that if somebody wants to transfer those credits forward into another program, they're kind of out of luck. So the challenge then is how do you go about being all things to all people? And the answer, of course, is you can't. So we try to do, you know, like they say, one size fits all, one size doesn't even fit most, but we'll try the best we can. We'll put a little elastic here and there, and we'll go for the best fit we can. One of the phrases that I get very tired of hearing is when instructors say, well, just do the math. And I don't know about your students, but math is not my students' strong suit. And as soon as they hear do the math, they think, oh, now I'm really in trouble. I have to do the math. So I found connecting the dots to be a little more friendly. Where I got the idea for this presentation was one of my very good students came to talk to me one day, and he was tanking in art history. And I asked him, well, what's the problem? He says, I figured art history, how hard could this be? You look at pictures all day and you talk about the pictures. What he didn't pick up on was the memorization. And he said, they just give me 1 million pieces of information by midterm, and by the end of the term, I've got 2 million pieces of information, and none of this makes sense. So then we started to talk a little about salad dressings and marinades and rubs and all their common ingredients. In other words, what we were starting to do is connect the dots. And I sat down with him and his art history stuff and tried to show him how This wasn't 2 million pieces of information, but there were things that were very clearly classifiable and easily identifiable. And if you could just remember where the dots were and how they connected, then it was much easier to remember. Just like if you try to teach culinary arts as a million pieces of information, you're going to have trouble. If somebody can't see the similarity between a chicken and a turkey when it comes to fabrication, they're in trouble right away. Somebody either has to show them or they have to catch on to it. So at any rate, the second conversation that led to this, excuse me, I didn't have onion rings, so I'm a little dry. The second conversation was with one of our art history teachers, and it's interesting because colleges can become very siloed and sometimes not accepting one department to another. And I remember having to fight hard to get an art class as an okay thing for a culinary arts person to take. There was resistance to two-dimensional design, to three-dimensional design, and to color theory. And the only way I was able to convince administration that it was okay for a culinary person to do that was to take them to a salon and then to a baking and pastry show so they could see that two-dimensional design, three-dimensional design, and color theory might just happen to come in handy. And while for me that was a no-brainer, if you're in what I found is a lot of folks that are in one discipline, they just tunnel in, and that's where they stay. So if that makes some kind of sense. So at any rate, one of the art history teachers and I had fought another battle to get art history considered to be a humanities. That was another hilarious conversation. But at any rate, they said we could do that, but we had to pick a title from the existing catalog to teach a course that would be acceptable. And the course that was given to us was called the Stiglitz Circle. Now, I don't know how academic your folks are, but mine are not academic at all. Stiglitz was either a kind of sausage or perhaps an antiquated wrestling hold. But there was no concept of what that was. So the idea was how do we keep all the students from all the disciplines awake most of the time, and how do we use this class as a model to get across the idea that collaboration is good, and that sometimes you have to collaborate as a class, sometimes we collaborate as a faculty, and when you get into the industry, you're darn sure going to be collaborating with somebody. Okay, I was a pretty good banquet chef, but I was not interested in the flowers. I had somebody that knew flowers to do that, and somebody that I didn't piss off, excuse my language, every time I talked to her, okay? So at any rate, just to kind of move this along, because it's not a long slideshow, and I used very little text. So it's a lot of pictures, so that's where the length comes from. Chef Carmel mentioned the whole idea of mindset, and it was kind of funny because I'd never heard of it. Great book out there called Mindset Lists, and it's by Tom McBride and a guy by the name of Ron Neff, and they both work at Beloit College. And what they've done basically is created a set of givens for any given age group. And what I found it very helpful for in school is that I have a lot of faculty that I would not call made for millennials. So that they kind of have to be nurtured into what this millennial believes and what they don't believe, and how that set of beliefs is going to affect what they'll learn and how they'll learn. So if we're talking about the Stiglitz Circle for a minute, this would be an art movement, basically an expressionist movement, from about 1920 to say about 1950. So I kind of did my research with Mr. Neff and looked at what the class of 15 believed. And what I'm trying to do is show the students not how you look at Impressionism, but how it was looked at then and where it came from. Sorry, that was two for one. That usually gets a wow out of them. And of course, I have to do some service to Atlanta with Coca-Cola, having cocaine in it. And NBC's always meant the National Biscuit Company. So, fast forward to our kids who are in school now. I found that very interesting, because I write cursively almost all the time.
I don't even know what cursive is.
Most people have no idea, or most people say under 25 maybe.
It's because we're in the south.
Yeah.
The north can't be way better. Almost London.
So I've talked to the kids about Dirty Harry, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. You know, it's just really interesting. I was talking to a student. I thought she was a little older, so maybe I could relate to her on at least some level. And she had just found a new singer called Paul McCartney. And Paul McCartney used to play with the Wings. And I said, really? And she said, well, he used to play for another band before that. And then it was total silence, crickets. And I thought, really? And then I just kind of let that one go. But at any rate, one of the things we really talked about was this whole idea of when you're moving into an expressionistic kind of art world, you're moving from want and hunger to an industrial idea where suddenly the hands are not out, the hands are trying to fix the refrigerator or to fix the phonograph. So this said, icebox, this is a new idea at this time period. This is a new idea. All these things that we take for granted. And what's happening is that as the people take more leisure time, they have more time to do other things, so that being a career artist is not out of the question. And instead of being a workman like it might have been centuries before, it's very different than that. So we have the culinary students do a little work on what the enclosure system was all about, and how you could control crops, and how you could control the breeding of animals. Now, just to kind of give a segue here, this was not a delivery like this, what I'm doing today. The way this was done, it was done over 11 weeks. And faculty members from each of the departments that had students in that class were guest lecturers. And they did their piece. And they buddied up with a student or two in the class that were from that discipline and had them help present their segment. And then just simple idea, the plow. But the arts people in there didn't see that as a plow. They saw that as a sculpture. Okay, the art students saw that as a still life. The culinary students saw that as a clementine. And they recognized it right away. The design people saw that as just a scale. The culinary people saw that as now you're able to hybridize and to make fruit a specific size or a color.
High portion, low portion, blueberries.
Exactly, exactly. You know, so we got dates being cultivated instead of just accidentally growing in the monastery yard. Now, it's really funny. I was looking for I Googled cattle breeding, and this was the only PG picture I could find. But this was definitely something that they caught on to, that a lot of before the enclosure farming, everything was just kind of happenstance. Other things that are brand new on the scene, the airplane and the train. We talked about this at great lengths. And the whole idea of, with the industrialization of the food business, came a whole artistic piece that was informed by that, whether it's the writing of the jungle or whether it's the cover art, because it changes. Check this one out. If you tilt it this way, you've got a kind of a scrawny head of a steer. If you tilt it the way it looks, you've got a leg. So it's almost like a anthropomorphic's not the right word. Cowpromorphic. However you say that. Moopomorphic, I guess. The culinary students saw a way of preserving food. The art students saw magnificent design. The advertising students saw something entirely different. Now, I thought that was always kind of an interesting poster. If you can find somebody in the class that's heard of John Philip Sousa, which you kind of have to play the Monty Python theme. What's that? The Liberty Bell, for them to even have any idea who he is. But the fact that they're using personalities to advertise food products and popular products, that got an incredible boost during World War I, because the general who was prominent in the news was Blackjack Pershing. So that was kind of an unwitting advertising campaign. Commercial canning is brand new. And they're starting to do labels that start to sell things. It doesn't just say mayonnaise, but it's got branding and all. That's all very different. I always thought that was great. Elijah's Manna. I wouldn't buy it. Apparently nobody else did, because it became Post Toasties. The beginning of using sports figures to advertise food. I looked up Wheaties, by the way, on the internet, because I was kind of interested in seeing who that was, because I couldn't read the print. And now I can see it. It says Tom Dolan. But I noticed that they were already on the ball, and Bruce Jenner on the Wheaties box is now Caitlin. So,
Well, that's Vanity Fair.
yeah, well, of course. This is an interesting idea. This was intended as a one-time Christmas promotion. They were going to make it once, and that was the end of it. And I don't know if you've ever watched, but I'm sure you have better things to do than this. But if you've ever followed the animals on the animal cracker boxes, as the animals become extinct, they're no longer available to go on the boxes. So look at the current one, and you'll see exactly what I mean. Now that's a whole different perspective. And I couldn't tell you this, but some of the design people told me that some of those symbols are Masonic. I used to live in Cambridge, right near the New England Confection Company, and that's how they advertised their Necco wafers.
And I bet people couldn't tell you what necklace names.
Most people couldn't. But it's kind of cool. That's one of their water towers.
What does it stand for?
New England Confection Company. Yep.
You can still get them if you go to Cracker Barrel.
Exactly. And it's what's kind of interesting, because right across the street from it is the Cambridge Cookie Company. And the Cambridge Cookie Company named its cookies after the different suburbs of Boston, and the only one that really stuck was Newton. Fig Newton. Now that's an interesting cat. His name is Epperson, and he was going to name that thing in his daughter's hand the Epsicle. But she must have said, "Oh, Pop." This is something that we end up doing an essay to accompany this. We ask the kids for things that how 5 seconds of imagination could turn into something really cool. And most of them can come up with it right off the top of their heads. Very few people realize that Birdseye was a person. Kind of an interesting guy if you ever read his bio. we did work with the U.S. Geological Survey, collecting specimens for the study of Rocky Mountain fever. Apparently, carrots and peas were safer. And then I just kind of finish up this section on food topics with Lewis Lunch in New Haven, Connecticut. They thought about the idea of what if you took a hamburger and put it on a roll? Would anybody buy it? Probably not. So, before we get into fashion, I thought this was a very interesting kind of thing in showing how, through the years, the advertising image on the Betty Crocker package has changed. My mom's Betty Crocker would have probably been the 1955, and the one in 1996 looks like she might run the company. So it's kind of an interesting thing for the kids to see just how all of this stuff evolves, whether it's a food style, or whether it's a fashion style, or whether it's a packaging or branding or whatever it is. And what's interesting is some of the students, when the students that are in one discipline see something from another discipline that's under the same umbrella, more often than not, it's a wow. It's really, I never knew that. And then they get talking, and it's very, very interesting dialogues. I got this from Steve Tanner, who is our fashion person, to kind of show the same kind of evolution. So I thought that's interesting, the picture on the right more than anything. And he explained to me that the reason for that change was as the woman went into the workplace, things had to be a little more practical. And that first one probably wouldn't work very well. Oops, where did I go? Did I miss one? No, I guess not. And they're heading into that period in the 20s, and just like now we have a lot of military influence on fashion, same kind of thing. The trench coat is a big deal. Things becoming a little more fun. And the movies, of course, in this whole period are influences for fashion, influences for food, influences for just about everything. And you can kind of see that kind of continuing. Oops, sorry, I get this trigger finger. And this is another interesting thing. This particular woman, fashion person, before her, all of the models were stationary. And she basically started the catwalk, and or the runway. And what the film people found fascinating was this happened shortly after this, the movie camera was developed. So that now, instead of just taking still pictures of something that was moving, you could take moving pictures. And that was all connected, of course, to the cinema industry. And then we're talking about fashions coming off of the movies. And a lot of this is reflected in food presentations. Another big fashion person, getting very simple. I really like this quote from her. Now this is kind of interesting because one of the words that I kind of picked up in doing a lot of this research was this whole idea of inform, that one art informs the other. And that the music of this whole period is very improvisational, which is not really different than expressionistic. And prior to this period, most people played music off of arrangements or off of sheet music. And in this period, it becomes the first time that people do the improv. And if people play the same way twice, they're ridiculed. So this is it's a different kind of thing, because it's not like a Bach arrangement of like 27 variations where every time you play them exactly the same. This is 27 variations that are different this time and different next time. So that very much feeds into that expressionistic thing. And same with Count Basie. And Mike, did you have any problem with the sound?
I didn't use any.
Your sound? Let's see if we can do this. Let's see. Everybody likes this if I can get it to go. Oh, a miracle. Sound.
Son premier cri, Django l'a poussé sur le lit de paille de la roulotte familiale. Sa mère, Négros, était danseuse. Son père, un artiste ambulant. Tellement ambulant qu'il abandonne Négros et ses deux fils, Django et son frère cadet Joseph. La caravane manouche s'arrête dans la périphérie de Paris après la Première Guerre. Le terrain vague offert à ses enfants de 10 et 12 ans n'est déjà plus le territoire de jeu de Django. Il rêve de nouvelles conquêtes. Dans les rues de Pigalle et de Montmartre, il fait la manche. Sur un banjo, il s'amuse, écoute et reproduit toutes les musiques qui l'entourent. C'est à Paris qu'il faut être. Paris, ses cabarets, ses clubs, où un jeune violoniste fait lui aussi ses débuts. Stéphane Grappelli. Django et Stéphane ont déjà entendu parler l'un de l'autre. Tous deux ont animé les rues de leur musique depuis leur première jeunesse. Stéphane Grappelli joue à la Croix du Sud.
Et un beau soir, je vois descendre quelqu'un qui paraissait aimer beaucoup la musique, un jeune homme avec des yeux très noirs qui s'installe au bar et dans un français plutôt extraordinaire me dit « Oh mon frère, comme j'aime la musique que vous jouez ». Et j'ai appris que c'était un gitane, Django Reinhardt.
La sonorité du violon de Stéphane Grappelli inspire Django. Il tente d'imaginer un mariage de la guitare et du violon. De quoi séduire les amateurs de jazz. Trop tôt peut-être.
Les solistes Django Reinhardt et Stéphane Grappelli sont deux des plus grands que l'on puisse trouver au monde. Il est possible que même en Amérique, il n'existe pas un guitariste aussi hot que Django.
Le quintet fait un triomphe. Les concerts se succèdent de la salle Pleyel au Big Apple de Pigalle. Le Hot Club invite les musiciens américains de passage à Paris. Coleman Hawkins, Eddie South, Bill Coleman et Duke Ellington. Tous les concerts se terminent en jam session et Django fait l'admiration de ses héros. Il réalise l'exploit de faire le bœuf avec Armstrong chez Bricktop à Montmartre.
I met Django Reinhardt during that time in Paris when I first went over there, you know. He knocked me out. Ooh, boy, that cat sure could play.
Le succès du quintet ne connaît pas que des hauts. La vie nomade sans contrainte est toujours plus alléchante pour Django que n'importe quel contrat. Il disparaît régulièrement pour rejoindre ses frères manouches ou pour une partie de billard, laissant ses partenaires dans l'embarras. Django gagne bien sa vie, mais la perd régulièrement au jeu ou en jouant au grand seigneur. Heureusement, les séances d'enregistrement sont nombreuses. Près de 60 disques sont pressés en 4 ans.
Interesting little clip, because we're talking about the same time period. Primarily an art course, but what we're trying to do is integrate all the arts, including the culinary arts. One of the things that a lot of even the music majors didn't, is that me or is that somebody else?
Another video probably
Coming up.
YouTube.
Yeah, let me go back. See if I can find the sound, which is always a challenge. We could just do this. Anybody know how to get the sound off of this?
Did it skate? Well, you gotta close out PowerPoint probably.
Pull another what? Pull it here. Oh, there it is.
Just close it. Just close YouTube.
Oh, okay.
X in the upper right. Yeah, close it.
Close and that'll do it.
Close tabs. Oh, wait, you clicked
Oh, clicked on the wrong one. Okay.
Well, stop there.
It stopped the noise, so that's what we wanted to do. The English teacher got the act too. It seemed like an appropriate thing for her to pick. I tried to tell her the Indian names was probably politically incorrect, but she pointed out to me that in 1840, not so much. But it's kind of an interesting kind of thing in that it's a poem that's very, what I call a rickety-tickety-tin kind of thing. It has the meter and it just kind of bounces along and it rhymes and does that. By the time you hit the expression period, this is more what it looks like. Nothing rhymes. There's no real meter, but it just delivers a real simple message. And the students love this one because that gives them the motivation to steal somebody else's fruit. I'm just going to go through this part quickly, but you can kind of see how the film majors get involved in this so that they can kind of show the evolution of the camera and the radio, because it's a whole new technology. I mean, if you think about it, if you wanted to see Django, you'd have to see him in concert. And now we're in a situation where you can buy recordings and you can hear it on the radio. Again, I'm just going to skip through the radio part because it's not terribly germane. I want to get to the food part before we get to the end here. But radio is starting to become a business. Entertainment is coming over the air, the sponsor. And of course, regulations. That's always going to be a part of the... I do not like these dissolve things, but the AV people told me I needed to do them. So, and I'm just going to come out of this part to show you what the original recording studios looked like. And that's the microphone, that big cone. Because individual instruments weren't mic'd, and what they did would be to move the musicians around so that they could get the proper effects. So it's a totally different idea. But at any rate, by the time the art history teacher gets into it, she's talking about Georgia O'Keeffe. And I think everybody's familiar with her paintings. They're usually southwest or flowers, very, very strong feminine imagery. So kind of a different take on how an artist looks at things. There's Georgia. I thought you'd like a reference point as to what she looked like. But I think this is my favorite story about her because it really informs a lot of things about not just our industry, but about the arts in general. If you remember back in the 60s when you bought a pineapple, it said on it Jet Fresh. It was Dole's brand. And the whole idea was you could get because of the airline industry, you could get a pineapple fresh. And before that whole thing happened, before you could get it jet fresh, if you wanted a fresh pineapple, you basically had to go to Hawaii. So promoting Hawaiian tourism was starting to happen during the time of the development of the airplane at this period. And Dole Pineapple commissioned Georgia O'Keeffe to do a set of ads for them. Now, very few people realize that somebody with the kind of status of Georgia O'Keeffe would have been given a commercial art contract. So they asked her to do a couple of ads. That was the first one. And of a ginger flower next to a cactus plant. And they hated it because it looked nothing like a pineapple. This was the second one. Pineapple bud. Looks nothing like a pineapple. So what happened? She got fired. You ever see that when a chef makes something and they think it's fabulous and nobody buys it? Let me show you who they hired. Something that was definitely very, very descriptive and that looked like a pineapple. Another one that's in the same expressionistic world that most of the kids could relate to is Ansel Adams. Because it's all black and white. And my favorite. I think we can say that about a lot of things. Okay, the food part. If you know where to stand, next to the table we have a certain chef from Chicago painting on the table. So his whole idea now is using the table as the canvas that's going to turn out to be the plate. They said this was Jackson Pollock on a cake. I was thinking third grade, but it doesn't look very interesting until you realize that it's grits and a poached peach. So this was what really sucked the kids who were not culinary into this, because I had one of my chefs come in and do demos on, we hate calling it molecular gastronomy, we're just leaving it at modernist cuisine. And showed them some of these very, just kind of interesting things that, looking at food totally differently. That's the meat factory, in case you were wondering. Made entirely of meat. I'd love to be able to crop these in such a way that you could only see the little people and then be able to open it up, but my skills in audiovisual aren't even close to that. I can't even turn the sound off. There's little penguins on the marshmallow flows. A couple divers thinking about looking for the tea bag. I haven't quite figured that out, whether he's inflating them and putting them to the right, or whether he's deflating them and putting them to the left. But I think that's one of those great Buddhist questions that you just have to leave out there. We did the demonstration of caviar for the kids. And it's kind of funny because I remember a few years ago, we had done a dessert in the restaurant with mango caviar. And one of our guests said no, that she didn't want to have it because she was vegetarian. So I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, I don't think there's any such thing as a mango sturgeon, but I'll look it up on Google. This was part of peanut butter and jelly. The jelly was the noodles, and the peanut butter was the powder on top. And everybody knows Homero Cantu is no longer with us, but that was one of his creations, where the dessert menu and the dip were intended to be edible. And most of the people that are in the other arts have no idea that we do this kind of thing. That looks like Eggs Benedict turned inside out to me. Other just images of things that are shown in different ways. I kind of like that. I didn't realize that Dali was quite the gastronome, and that the image was supposed to be that he got his face too close to the fire, trying to get a good close look at the food. And that the bacon, you can see by the side there, was supposed to be all shriveled up because it had its life taken out of it. It's about almost happy hour time, so absolute Dali. And then just art and food comes together one more time. So that's what we got. I hope it's not too rapid fire for you, because it's more, it loses its punch when you don't have instructors from different disciplines appearing every week to do it. But part of the shock value of it is when I wander into an art class, or when the sound engineer wanders in, or when somebody else wanders in to do their thing. They have no idea what's going on until we really explain it. And it's really fun to suck the kids into it because they're forced to work with the faculty in their discipline to how do they fit? How are they part of all this? Does that make sense? So,
So the course called the Stiglitz Circle,
Stiglitz Circle, yeah.
and the idea was to explore it from a variety of perspectives.
Yes.
What they were doing, who they were, what was happening to them.
And how they interlocked. So, I hope that was interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,